Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. In today's episode, we're chatting all about intimacy. The things we talk about are the difference between sex and intimacy, how to increase confidence around asking for what you desire, and the power of the sound, Now let's get into it.
Welcome to the Date Forever podcast, everyone. Today we have Amy Culler. She is the intimacy coach. She helps people feel connected where it counts. Amy saw a need for a real solution to intimacy, so she created it. She's a certified couples addiction and sex therapist. And Amy has delivered an epic, hilarious TED Talk. And her first book is coming out very soon. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
So Amy, can you just tell us a little bit about what intimacy is?
Well, thank you for asking and thank you for having me. Intimacy, I describe it as the vibe and the space between you. That feeling that you have, it's a welcome familiarity. Intimacy is described in the dictionary as the connection between two people, like a man and a woman. And it's also that intimate knowledge that you can have of something, like he's intimate with his favorite sports team. He knows all their stats, you know?
The vibe.
So, right. So, but it's that feeling that you have in that space between you.
So you noticed a gap. How did you get interested in intimacy?
Well, in my own relationship, there was an intimacy. There was a space in the intimacy. We had an intimacy problem, which I believe every single relationship does. And I did what you normally do. We went to go talk to a traditional talk therapist, and that wasn't really addressing our sexual or intimacy or our physical intimacy. So I did what you do after that. I went to a sex therapist. Do you know what a sex therapist is? More talking. And that really wasn't going to address our issues. You know, the usual homework that they give you, and I know because I am a trained sex therapist, is to give each other massages or to try these different things or to talk about your traumas, and that doesn't make you feel closer. It really doesn't. And I knew that I needed another solution, and it ended my marriage. And I went, I'm going to solve this. And I started, quite honestly, but quite frankly, by researching men's sexual health issues. So I became very familiar with porn and the influence on the brain and how that affects relationships and all kinds of things. And so I wanted to find real solutions, and I knew other people did too. So I went off and learned all these different modalities, like the best communication modality, which is imago therapy, and I studied from Gottman. I learned all of the best modalities and took the best from each, but what I learned the most from was helping people with their sexual health issues and addictions, porn addictions, what they thought would be sexual addictions, and finding real solutions for it without just talking, because talking doesn't make us feel closer. And sex doesn't make us feel closer.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on this through your own journey, that sex and intimacy are two different things. So we often get that confused, I guess. So can you just explain, I guess, how you define the two and how they differ?
Absolutely. Intimacy, as I describe it, intimacy has two parts. There's emotional intimacy and physical intimacy. And that's what a relationship takes, is emotional. And that's what a good sexual encounter takes, is emotional intimacy and physical intimacy. And when you mix the two, it's magical. So intimacy and the difference between sex is sex can be a cold act without intimacy. Lots of couples have sex without intimacy. And then there are other couples who have intimacy without sex. And how do you merge? How do you solve those two things? It's because the other part is that intimacy requires two people. It wants to have somebody else. It can't have intimacy by itself. And since there are those two pieces, emotional and physically, you end up with two people who have two completely different languages. One of them is emotional intimacy, right? And one of them is physical intimacy. So how do you merge? How do you connect when you're wired differently? How do you connect your wires when you're wired differently?
So do you have a name for that sweet spot where you've got both emotional intimacy and physical intimacy?
I do. It's the name of my new book.
I have asked that question without knowing that, so that's good.
It's The Huddle.
The huddle.
The huddle, right? Because it's exactly that. It's that moment where you drop the competition, because that's what happens in the power struggle. Right after the honeymoon phase comes the power struggle phase of the relationship, and you're competing. Pick up your floors. What are we eating for dinner? And that one piece where you connect as a team and you drop what's going on elsewhere is the huddle. And as I say, if you're not connecting outside of the bedroom, then your intimacy won't feel very connected. If the only time you're trying to be intimate is when you're having sex, then your sex won't feel very intimate. And you can't just talk, okay, let's talk about your day. People can't figure out how it is we need to connect. So what is it? Because some people are like, he doesn't listen. And he's like, I listen all day. So that's why I work with that sound.
Tell us about that sound, because that is in your TED Talk and it's pretty profound.
I will. I discovered that sound in my work, and it was my dream to share it with the world in a TED Talk. So there it was. So the sound, what I've discovered is that the sound is your huddle. Making the sound together, as I said, it's the vibe between you. This is a positive vibe. It's the sound of yes. And when you do it together, it is both emotionally vulnerable and physically vulnerable. So when you do it together, and I mean, I say people huddle before you talk. Huddle first, talk later. Because when you feel connected, you feel safe to express yourself. And when you feel like you're feeling understood, that's what it is. I mean, people can talk. Have you ever heard maybe Sammy gets frustrated sometimes, Nathan, and her voice goes really high and she's just right?
That's it.
He's got eyes of familiarity. He's like, yeah, I know that one.
Right?
I have seen it once or twice.
So kind.
And like that vibe is just like so, and you're like, whoa. But if you can just stay with her and go, and match her intensity, match her vibe, that way she's feeling heard and she's feeling like she's emotionally supported. So it's like this tool creates emotional vulnerability, physical vulnerability. It allows you to show up for each other in ways where it's like it's a practice. It's a simple practice.
So, Amy, you mentioned that a lack of physical intimacy and emotional intimacy really impacted your relationship. Can you tell us what that looks like when a couple doesn't have it? Because I assume that it obviously it impacts more than the bedroom.
And that's exactly it. It starts to show up in all parts of your life. They start to pull away from each other, blame each other. In my particular relationship, when we got together, and this is my upcoming book, so it's vulnerable for me to talk about. I knew going in that there were sexual health issues, and I was like, oh, whatever. There's a million ways we can connect. There's toys, there's other boys, there's the second string. We can be creative. There's a whole body of stuff you can do, but that understanding of how it impacts his confidence and his ability to perform without knowing what else to do. So that's what you start to feel, this shame. You start to withdraw from your friends. You start to withdraw from each other. I mean, it didn't matter to me that there were sexual health issues. I loved that he was always squeezing me and touching me and loving me up, so proud to be with me, share me with with the world. I mean, I felt like a goddess. And then when they starts to show up and affect your relationship, you just start to shut down, and there was no physical contact. As I say, he worked a lot and I eat a lot of cheese.
We've all got our numbing tools, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. And, in my work, he's still somewhat very, very close. And he is a huge supporter of mine.
That's
I'm
beautiful.
appreciative of that. Yeah.
So we sort of talked a little bit about, you mentioned other boys, other toys. How important is it that we have a similar sexual appetite or compatibility with our partner?
That is, God, you guys are good. Well, I believe there's, I talk about a sexual desire discrepancy, which is a label that therapists use. And I talk about Kevin and Jackie in my TED,
Yeah.
and they're the couple I talk about in my book. And this is based on a true couple, a bunch of them merged together. And they have, they got a label from a therapist once that said, oh, you have SDD, which is sexual desire discrepancy. And what that means is a difference between the sex that you wish you were having and the sex that you're in fact having. And, therapists label people with that. They say 80% of couples have that. And I say 99.9% of all humans have a difference between what they wish they were having and what they're actually having. So I don't want that label to be in there.
But I feel like you could say that about any context of any area of your life, right? Like how many people have got 100% of what their wants and desires in every area of their life? Like you've got, deficit desire in every area.
Exactly. So I talk to sexual discrepancy a lot because that happens in everybody. How do you actually do each other's needs is really a huge context. Especially because you've got those two people that we talked about, right? Where the one wants emotional, Jackie wants the emotional context, she wants emotional intimacy, and Kevin wants sex and physical intimacy. As I say, every man's love language is physical touch and sex. So how do you actually do that? Well, you have to build that physical and intimacy practice in between. I say it's as if the team gets on the field to play football and they haven't practiced it all together. So now they can't play at all. They're not playing a good game of his type of game, and they're not playing a good game of her type of game. And I'm going to share one of my big discoveries with you through my work is that most people go into a sexual encounter trying to be reciprocal. Okay, we're going to have a good encounter. You're going to have a great time. Is it good for you? Is it good for me? Is it good for you? Is it good for me? Well, the truth is, if you're trying to make it good for both of you, then it's not going to be a great game. Sort of like a meal. He likes it hot with tons of peppers and spicy and lots of carbohydrates, and she wants vegetable soup. So how do you determine the difference between that? The same as you would those meals. Okay. Sometimes we're going to go into one meal, tonight's meal is going to be your meal.
Spicy.
We're going to do it hot and spicy. And the next meal is going to be all about you. And what you learn from that is the same thing you get from that huddle. This is a big one. You learn to give and receive.
So Nathan and I have talked about this before in context of not just sex in the bedroom, but like your relationship. And if you are getting to a place where it's like compromise, then you're not with two people who didn't get their ideal outcome, rather than finding a way to collaborate and have, you get a win, I get a win, or we, find the double or triple win. But that word compromise or that, finding spicy, carb and soup, like you ruin both.
Yeah, I totally agree. That because exactly what happens is then you're never satisfied. I joke with guys, do you make sure she's satisfied before you're satisfied? And he's like, well, yeah. And I say, well, that means that neither one of you is satisfied. Because that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Now you've made a soup that's got spicy and carbs, and neither one of you is like sort of like, okay, this is meh. It means we're fine. I'm tolerating it. You've compromised exactly that, and then you don't get your passion. So what I suggest is that you make that meal totally his meal. We're talking carbs and spices, and in that way, you're giving to him. You're getting the practice of giving him the meal he wants with all the spice and all the carbs. And even though it might not be your favorite meal, you're going to enjoy watching him enjoy it. You're going to enjoy giving it to him. You might even spoon feed it to him. I made this for you. Take it to the plate, make it beautiful, and on vegetable soup night, he's going to be going, oh yeah, you are enjoying your vegetable soup. I am enjoying. And again, I feel like everything needs to be that practice of giving and receiving. And also that's what keeps it interesting for a lifetime, because otherwise the person who has the lower variance for seasonings
less spicy,
or for spices and
more salt and
carbohydrates
pepper.
is running the show. And that way Kevin gets to go in each time and go, I want to try this. It gives him the practice also of asking for what he wants.
Boundaries.
It gives her the practice of stretching into what's right for her, knowing what's not right for her, but again, stretching herself. And because she's going to have a night that's all hers, or a week that's all hers, or however we determine is right for which team, she's going to learn to practice asking for what she'd like. Wow, what a great practice that is, hey?
Yeah.
I love this. So if there is a couple who have got, what they feel might be like sexual incompatibility, where someone wants it a lot more or of a particular style or flavor, it's more about finding that give receive rather than the middle ground between their two flavor spectrums.
Story time. Story time. So he wanted some kinky, he wanted something hardcore, he wanted to get and not have all that warm up. And so I helped her use that sound to warm herself up, to warm herself up so that she could go in there in that mood and take him in that nasty space that he wanted. And I mean, she really stretched herself and did that. And Emily was her name. And she wore a wig to do it because it really wasn't even something like she's comfortable in doing. I even suggest people go to a hotel so they don't have to feel like it's in their bedroom, just really stepping outside of yourself.
Yeah. Very cool.
And hers, this was the good one. Her time, what she really wanted was that bathtub with bubbles and a glass of wine and champagne. And he's like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, you have no idea. You might discover something about yourself you like.
Yeah,
and by the second time that it was her night and she wanted it again, she was like, yeah, I liked it. Let's do it again. He was like, okay. He bought like facial masks. He bought those doodly things you put your hair up in. He was the one who was all into it because he had never given himself the permission to like a bubble bath and to like, tickling her feet and washing her legs. And it was so they really stretch. And so from there, you start to build trust, right? And then you can really ask for what you want.
Yeah. That was exactly where I wanted to go. Is you said, like, imagine that idea that you just ask for what you want. If someone's not even sure what they want, or they're not confident asking for what they want, how can we work through that? How can we build some confidence or some grit there?
And there's always, that too is really normal. I want everybody to know there's usually one partner who initiates more than the other partner. And it's so important to initiate. People like, well, it's okay. I'm there for when he wants, but it's so important to initiate and let your partner know that you want them, that you desire them, that they're the one you've chosen for your team. You want to, you're still in the game with them.
Yeah.
So in my TED, I talk about the candy dish, and that is a really great, really fun. And so, Kevin and Jackie will put out a bowl of candy, and when Jackie wants a little sugar, she puts a little candy in the dish, and if Kevin agrees, he puts in a candy too. And you can name those candies. And they called me one time because jelly beans, let's do that thing, and chocolates, as I say,
It's their
he can
beautiful
have,
own little language.
yeah, their own language. He can have a lollipop if I get licorice, and have fun with it. And that way she can have fun with it and she doesn't have to use the words. So often it's the words that cause people distress. So most of my therapy and most of my connection work is wordless.
Yeah, so it's about defining that language, I guess, up front so that you are on the same page without actually having to necessarily verbalize it.
Yeah, and allowing yourself to say your wants without having to cross those places that make you feel uncomfortable. As I say, you can go to the taco restaurant and just point. Oh, I want that. If you go to a language where they don't speak a different language, or you don't speak, you can just point to the menu. Oh, I'll try that, and you can do that. That's allowed. That's still initiating. I work with couples and I tell them to get a scarf because the scarf is my favorite tool for intimacy. It's my favorite tool for intimacy, and it's the exercise that I start everybody with because you can initiate by wearing it around your neck. You can initiate by hanging it on the bedroom door knob. You can send your partner a picture of the scarf. And that can be enough. And the reason I like the scarf is because that's the exercise that you then take the huddle to. Once you get that yummy sound going and it's like, then you can express the sound of pleasure and use the scarf like, oh, that feels good, and touch through the scarf. So it gives you a new way to touch each other. So you can really explore your menu and you can initiate in different ways and never get bored.
So if we're listening to this and hearing that, oh, what an idea that we have more of a give-receive model than a compromise model, how does it sort of play into the relationship if somebody's got a much higher sex drive or a much higher desire for, I guess, frequency?
That is the challenging part because that is our diet, and everybody has different dietary needs, and we have to acknowledge that. And the thing I say is you're responsible for staying as teammates. You're responsible for being teammates. You're responsible for showing up for practice, and you're responsible for showing up for the big game. And those games in between, then those are practice games, and that's up to people to negotiate. And otherwise, sometimes you can practice by yourself. That's okay. Because it's really important to know that somebody else is not in charge of your sexual appetite. People let themselves starve otherwise. And they'll feel shame about it. But what I say about that big game and is that practice, when you get into a partnership, oh, you guys are sweet. When you guys get into a partnership, you're on a team. You're on an intimate team. You've committed to being on an intimate team with each other. So I encourage you to try this, like to huddle with each other every day, which is taking just 3 breaths and going, and that little is perfect. That little is perfect. It can just be super easy even. And then the game is to practice staying in connection, which that sound does, and exploring pleasure, which that sound takes you to, because it takes you to that, and you have to start with that sound in order to get them going. And that's it enhances your experience. So, this is good. It enhances your experience. You got to try this. Make a little smile on your face, just a little smile, and go, And can you feel your mouth start to water? Because it actually activates your salivary glands. And when your salivary glands are activated, not only does your mouth get wet, but all of you gets juicy and turned on. It turns on your whole system, endocrine, testes, ovaries, the whole system. And saliva turns on your brain with all these neurochemicals and peptides. So that sound really turns you on, and it releases chemicals that tell your brain when you're satisfied. So you actually have more satisfaction. So you have more sexual satisfaction when you are actually you have more connection, you have more emotional connection, more physical connection because you can feel the vibrations. So the sex that you're having when you're having the game is more satisfying. And when the sex that you're having when you're having that game is more satisfying because you're actually doing it consciously, like that's why it's called the big game, because you do it consciously, then you can have those little play games whenever you fool around whenever you want to,
Yeah.
but you'll both enjoy it more and you both might be more open to it. So what I find is that if his appetite is all the way up here, he's getting more satisfaction when they're having a meal. And if her appetite is down here, she's having more satisfaction, which makes her want it more.
Yeah. I think that's definitely true for us. Like the more sex we have, the more sex we want to have.
Nice.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Now I try adding sound try adding that at the beginning of it and see if you can keep all your bodily sounds because they'll change throughout and that's also where you hear those sounds that go, or, and those little,
Yeah.
when she makes those sounds, that's the good spot. It's like, ooh, right along those boundaries. Those boundaries are the erotic parts, right?
Yeah. So, Amy, I would love to hear your commentary on, I guess, the projected social dialogue that we have around sexual relationships within, long-term relationships. It's kind of feel like it's like the social norm to have this dialogue that it's really hot and heavy and, at its peak in the honeymoon period. And then it's just all natural and normal for it to die away across the duration of your relationship. I don't believe that. I think that's a social conditioning. I think that if you want a really healthy, happy, thriving sex life, then you make it a priority and you do that. But I also don't have kids, and I hear that that's a big changing point in a relationship. Can you talk to us a little bit about, I guess, a sexual life cycle of a normal or what's an aspirational couple?
Gladly. Thank you. So when you get together, there's that honeymoon phase, which really is a chemical reaction. Bless chemistry. Really, it's magical. And then the chemistry, but when you move in together, even while that chemistry is high, you're still going to have that power struggle because it's normal to have that power struggle of, are we doing, the mess on the floor, who's taking out the trash, and getting into those life things, falling into the rut of life's lists and responsibilities. So you're always negotiating life and responsibilities, and sometimes sex starts to fall away even without kids, which is why it's important to keep that vibe alive, show up for practice, and make sure that you're having that big game scheduled. Game nights. And even if you can't go to the game night, like something's happening in your life. One of my couples was recently dealing with grief, the passing of a parent. And his parent died, and she called me. She's like, well, what do we do? It's our game night. And I said, you just get together and you huddle. You cuddle. That's how you show up for your teammate. That's the game they need that night. And that's what it's about, is learning to play your partner's game and show up for each other. So then once you have a baby, this is fascinating. Love this. Once you have a baby, his testosterone drops. So let's say I don't know my numbers. Let's say his testosterone is a 10. She has a baby. His testosterone drops to a 2. And now they have this brief family nesting period. Then suddenly, after a couple of months, and learned it's different at different ages and different times and which kid, after a couple of months, between 3 months, I'm going to say, and about 18 months, his testosterone pops up to a 15. He is a horny frat boy. And he's like, come on, baby, let's do it. And she's like, what you talking about? I'm with the baby. And this is where there starts to be a struggle. So she starts to look and say, why isn't he nesting with us anymore? There starts to be this division.
The rubber band starts to pull.
Yeah, this division, because, the truth of the matter is having a baby is a very intimate, emotional, and physical, sensual experience. And he starts to feel left out, especially also because his energy is up here, his needs are up here, and he's like, what happened to us? So he starts to, feel rejected. But it's not. It's a hormonal reaction, and knowledge is power. That's the thing I say. And this is also the period lately I've been dealing with couples in this exact space, and I'm hearing from women there, he's going, well, he doesn't want to make out. He doesn't want to do other things. He just wants to have penetration. And what I've been saying to these men is, to these guys is, this is your opportunity to connect and explore. Because if you don't learn about what makes you feel good in your body and explore outside of penetration, your sex life is going to get boring.
Bland.
Really bland and really boring. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm going to tell her to lay you face down and take her fingernails and just drag them slowly down your back, over your butt, to your knees, and then I'll tell her to so he's like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, this is about really learning to feel good in her body. And what I say to him is, she's just had a baby.
Need a reminder.
Yeah, she really could use to feel pleasure in her body. So instead of like making orgasm your goal, what about exploring that pleasure and just falling into those ways that make you go, ah, oh, following that sound, so that you're really staying connected, using this time to explore pleasure. Because that's what I say to people. You're young, you've just had kids. If you can explore your whole body's sensual pleasure starting now, you'll be able to explore it that way for a lifetime.
Yeah. So I think you touched on it before, that game night can be scheduled in. So, so is that something that you recommend for people to kind of build some anticipation for it?
I'm all about anticipation. Anticipation is the best aphrodisiac. And it goes both ways. So I'm going to go back to that couple where he's, horny and has a much higher level of interest than she does. And sometimes I'll say to her, he's the one who wants to look forward to it. He is the one who's itching for it. I know that your libido is a little bit low right now, but he's stretching to think of the things that you need. I mean, he has to remember to think to pick up diapers. So I want you to get some sexy, hot, red thong underwear for him. And I want you to give it to him on Friday morning and tell him to wear it, and that you want him to know that he's wearing it all day long. You want to know that he's wearing it when he's cooking you dinner tonight and you're after the kids are going to sleep. That way he's building so much anticipation. He is so excited that all she really has to do is show up and touch him, and he's going to be so excited because he's been able to build up the anticipation all day long while she's exhausted. She didn't have to do much at all. It's a very realistic solution.
Playing the resources. Yeah.
Yes.
So Amy, I mean, this has been an amazing chat. I would love to know, is there a daily or weekly or monthly practical tip that people can use to increase the intimacy in their relationship?
So I'm going to go back to that huddle, and I'm going to just tell you how I suggest that people use it and play with it and try it, and how to implement that game night, because this is my two favorite tools. Take notes. It's this simple. You ready to take notes?
Yeah.
That's number one.
That's it. That's the sound. Get yourself to make that sound. And what I say is, you can hear my voice. It just pulls me right down, right into my heart, right into like that vibe, that really I care. I really do. So my thing is, when you come home and you're in two different moods, he's coming home from work, she's had the baby, going back to that family. You're in two different moods. He's entering the door thinking, where is she? Why isn't she greeting me at the door? Where's my soft place to fall? And she's like, why isn't he helping with me with the baby? I'm exhausted. And you're in two completely different vibes. So my suggestion is walk in the door, connect to the door before you have any words. Just wrap your arms around him or her the other way around. It's easier front to back. Hold him from behind and just because it sets the vibe and it says, I'm home. it wires you through those strings, those heartstrings. And home is where the heart is. Home is where you huddle. You're not going to make that sound or do that vibe with somebody else. It's so much more profound than saying I love you. It's the action, it's the vulnerability. It's like making love everywhere, just when you do it, it's that piece. And then when you take that to the bedroom, it automatically connects you. You're used to it connecting you. It's that safe place that you go together. And that will keep you connected through all of the waves of that life is going to bring you. And knowing how not to talk together, knowing how not to talk and connect when you need to will come in very handy. Calling a truce and going, means I'm here with you. I know we're going to work it out. We're teammates.
It's really beautiful. Yeah. So, Amy, we have a couple of really fundamental values at Fuel Collective. So they're to date forever, to love life, and then also be the change. So we talked a little bit about kind of all of them today, but I want to say that, be the change is about being the change that you want to see in your own life. And that was kind of that piece about figuring out what you want and then asking for it. You got to be the change in that element of your relationship. But then also about being the change in the wider world and the change that you want to see. So to say thank you for joining us today, we've given 365 days worth of seeds to a family in Malawi so that they can grow some nourishing food and take better care of their family and their immediate village. So thank you so much for making that possible.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. You guys are doing beautiful work in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Amy, if people want to connect with you or want to learn a little bit more about what you do, how should they do that?
Well, they can reach me at amycolor.com. That's COLOR without a U. I joke. There's no you in me. I'm also on Facebook, Amy Color Intimacy Coach. You can find my TED Talk. I'm very easy to approach. Not contact me anyway. And I offer free consultations because I know how scary it is to reach out to somebody. And I want people to feel confident and safe and have access to these tools because I know that they work.
Beautiful.
Yeah, awesome.
And Amy, when's the book coming and where can they get it?
Oh, the book should be out 3 months ago, which means it will be done.
Sounds like our podcast,
right?
Pre-launch.
Unbelievable. Life is like that. So I'm hoping that it'll be out in the next month or so, and it'll be on Amazon. And again, they should sign up through my site. There will be a free downloads page. I'm going to have classes online after that, where I'm really helping people connect without just talking and really building that foundation of intimacy so that they can build on it.
Beautiful.
So, sorry, what is the name of the book?
The Huddle.
The Huddle.
And it's the first book in a series that's called The Intimacy Game Plan.
Oh,
and it's a whole game plan that's written in a language for guys.
Amazing.
Yeah. Good stuff. Thank you so much, Amy. This has been awesome.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.